The petals of the white lily trembled in my hands from an unexpected draft, though the doors were shut tight. I was ready to chalk it up to fatigue when I heard a low, quiet voice. "Are you Sophia?" The man standing at the entrance looked as if he had stepped out of the shadows tall, with a predatory grace to his movements and eyes the color of amber. His gaze lingered on me just a second longer than courtesy allowed, making my heart race. He placed a small branch with charred leaves on the counter. "I need you to find a flower." His voice was almost a whisper, but there was something unyielding in it. "The moon bloom." I didn't have time to answer before the glass display rattled from a loud thud, and I thought I saw a shadow flicker in the corner of the room. "We don't have much time," he added. Chapter 1, Petals and Secrets. Sophia adjusted the position of a vibrant red rose in the centerpiece arrangement, her fingers deftly weaving it among daisies and sprigs of baby-s breath. The bell above the shop's door jingled, pulling her focus from the flowers. "Be right with you," she called out, wiping her hands on her apron before turning. Her small shop, Magnolia Blooms, wasn't much, but its warmth and charm drew in a steady stream of locals looking for the perfect bouquet for anniversaries, apologies, or just because. The man standing near the counter was not a regular customer. Dressed in a dark coat that brushed just above his knees and with an air of quiet intensity, he stood out like a raven in a field of sparrows. His eyes, gray with flecks of silver, caught hers, and for a moment, Sophia felt an odd sensation, as if the room had suddenly tilted. "I am looking for a bouquet," he said. His voice was low, rich, and slightly rough, as though he wasn't used to talking much. "You've come to the right place," Sophia replied, shaking off her unease. "What's the occasion?" The man hesitated. His gaze flicked to a display of lilies before returning to her. "It's personal." Sophia nodded, sensing he wasn't the type to offer more than necessary. "Any specific flowers in mind?" "Something timeless," he said after a moment, his voice softer now. "Elegant but not too showy." Sophia moved to the workbench, her mind already pulling together an image of what might suit him. "I have just the thing. Roses and calla lilies, maybe." "Or would you prefer something seasonal?" "That sounds good," he said, though it was clear he wasn't really focused on the flowers. He shifted his weight, his gaze wandering the shop. "You can pick it up tomorrow afternoon," Sophia said, tying a ribbon around the base of the arrangement. "Who should I put on the tag?" He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "No name." Sophia tilted her head. "Anonymous delivery, or are you just keeping secrets?" The corner of his mouth quirked up just the faintest hint of a smile. "Something like that." Sophia didn't press further, though her curiosity burned. He paid in cash, his hand brushing hers as he passed the bills. His skin was colder than she expected. Before she could say anything, he turned and walked out, leaving behind a faint, earthy scent that reminded her of pine needles and rain-soaked soil. The days that followed were routine, but the mysterious man became a regular presence. Every few weeks, he came in and ordered a bouquet. Each time, the designs grew more intricate: white lilies with accents of ivy, crimson roses with sprigs of lavender, orchids paired with hydrangeas. Always anonymous, always paid in cash. Sophia found herself looking forward to his visits, though he rarely stayed longer than necessary. She learned little about him except his name, Marcus, and even that had been a slip on his part. When she asked about his unusual flower choices, he muttered, "It's for someone who deserves the best," then quickly changed the subject. Despite his reserved demeanor, there was something magnetic about him. A quiet confidence, an air of mystery that clung to him like the scent of the bookcase he left with. One evening, long after the shop had closed, Sophia stayed late to prepare an order for a wedding. The cool spring air drifted in through the open window, carrying the scent of the nearby woods. The soft hum of crickets filled the room as she arranged a cascade of white roses and eucalyptus. A low, mournful howl rose from the forest. Sophia froze, her hand hovering over a ribbon. The sound wasn't unusual wolves had been heard in the area before, but this one was closer than she'd ever heard. Curiosity and a strange pull urged her toward the sound. Grabbing her jacket, she stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against her skin. The howl came again, and she found herself moving toward the woods, her heartbeat quickening. As she pushed through the trees, the moonlight bathed the forest in a silvery glow. The sound of rustling leaves and snapping branches reached her ears, and she ducked behind a tree, unsure of what she was walking into. That's when she saw him. Marcus stood in a small clearing, his body hunched over as if in pain. His coat was discarded on the ground, and his hands clutched at the earth. His breaths came in ragged gasps, and his skin shimmered in the moonlight, taking on an almost otherworldly glow. Before Sophia could call out to him, his body began to change. Bones shifted, stretching and reforming. His hands twisted into massive paws, and dark fur sprouted along his arms. His face elongated into a muzzle, and a pair of piercing yellow eyes locked onto hers. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Marcus, the man she thought she was beginning to understand, was a wolf. For a moment, their eyes remained locked. Then, with a growl that sent a shiver down her spine, Marcus turned and vanished into the shadows of the forest. Sophia stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing. The howl that echoed through the trees a moment later was no longer distant. It was him. Her quiet, predictable life had just changed forever. Chapter 2. The lingering scent. Sophia didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the cold cup of tea in her hands. Images of Marcus in the clearing replayed in her mind, the shimmer of his skin under the moonlight, the grotesque beauty of his transformation, and the way his piercing eyes had locked onto hers just before he disappeared into the forest. A wolf. He had become a wolf. Her mind churned with questions. Was he dangerous? Was it magic or something else entirely? Did he know she'd seen him? The thought sent a shiver through her. By morning, the pale light of dawn seeped into her kitchen, and Sophia knew she couldn't pretend she'd imagined it. She needed answers, but Marcus wasn't the type to offer them freely. The bell above the shop door jingled around midday, startling Sophia out of her restless thoughts. She looked up, her breath catching as Marcus stepped inside. He looked the same as always, tall, composed, and cloaked in an air of quiet mystery. The only difference was his expression. It was sharper today, his gray eyes scanning the shop as if he expected something or someone to leap out at him. "Good morning," Sophia managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Morning," he replied, his tone neutral. But his gaze lingered on her for a moment too long, and she wondered if he suspected she knew. "What can I do for you today?" she asked, moving to the counter. "The usual." Sophia bit back a sigh. He always gave the vaguest of instructions, leaving her to craft something based on intuition alone. She reached for a bundle of roses, her movements deliberate as she tried to gauge his mood. "You've got great timing," she said casually, hoping to provoke some reaction. "I was just thinking about you." Marcus's eyes flicked to hers, a shadow of wariness crossing his face. "Thinking about me?" She shrugged, forcing a smile. "You've been my most loyal customer lately. I can help but be curious. Who are these flowers for?" He hesitated, the faintest hint of tension in his posture. "It doesn't matter." "Doesn't matter to you, or doesn't matter to me?" Marcus's lips curved into the faintest smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You ask a lot of questions, Sophia." Her pulse quickened at the sound of her name on his lips. "Maybe I'd stop asking if you'd just answer one of them." The room fell silent, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Marcus stepped closer, and Sophia instinctively straightened, her heart pounding. "You should be careful," he said softly, his voice carrying a note of warning. "Not every mystery is meant to be solved." The words hung in the air as he placed a wad of cash on the counter and turned to leave. Sophia waited until he was gone before exhaling, her knees nearly giving out as she leaned against the counter. "He knows I saw him." She was sure of it now. The bookcase, the cryptic warnings, his nocturnal visits, it all painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. Marcus wasn't he just a man with secrets, he was something else entirely. That night, Sophia found herself drawn back to the woods. Armed with a flashlight and a racing heart, she retraced her steps to the clearing where she'd seen him transform. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting the forest in an eerie darkness. She found the spot easily enough. The earth was disturbed, and the faint scent of pine and rain lingered in the air, a scent she now associated with Marcus. Sophia knelt, her fingers brushing the ground. Something gleamed faintly in the beam of her flashlight. It was a button, smooth and dark, with a faint swirl etched into the surface. She slipped it into her pocket, unsure what it meant but certain it was important. A rustling sound nearby made her freeze. She turned off the flashlight, her breath catching as her ears strained to catch any movement. "Are you following me now?" The voice, deep and familiar, made her whirl around. Marcus emerged from the shadows, his gray eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "I wasn't," Sophia stammered, taking a step back. "Liar," he said, though there was no malice in his tone. He crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides, his presence overwhelming in the quiet darkness. "You should be stayed home." "I couldn't," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I saw you, Marcus. I saw what you are." His expression darkened, and for a moment she thought he might turn and leave. But then he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I know. Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, emboldened by his response. "Because I was hoping you'd pretend you didn't see it." He looked past her, his gaze distant. "It's safer that way." "For who, you or me?" He didn't answer. Sophia took a step closer, her fear giving way to curiosity. "You're not going to hurt me, are you?" "No," he said firmly, his eyes snapping back to hers. "Never." "Then stop pushing me away," she said, her voice steady now. "You're not as scary as you think you are, Marcus. And whatever this is, whatever you're hiding, I can handle it." Marcus stared at her, his jaw tightening. For a moment, it seemed as though he might open up. But then he shook his head, his expression hardening. "You don't understand, Sophia," he said, his voice low and strained. "This isn't just about me, it's about you. The more you're around me, the more danger you're in." With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Sophia alone in the clearing. But his warning did little to quell her determination. Marcus might think he could keep his secrets buried, but Sophia wasn't about to let the mystery rest. Not when she could still feel the lingering scent of pine and rain, pulling her deeper into his world. Chapter 3, Under the moonlight, the week crawled by, marked by sleepless nights and a gnawing curiosity that refused to let Sophia rest. Each time Marcus visited the shop, his words replayed in her mind, "The more you're around me, the more danger you're in." He didn't stop coming, though his demeanor remained guarded. The warmth she thought she'd glimpsed in him before was buried under layers of tension, and yet he never once stayed away. Sophia told herself she should let it go. But as the moon waxed toward fullness, the pull to uncover the truth only grew stronger. On the night of the full moon, Sophia found herself pacing her small apartment. Her flower shop was closed, the streets of their sleepy town quiet under the pale glow of the rising moon. By the time the clock struck midnight, she couldn't stand the uncertainty any longer. Grabbing a flashlight and slipping on a pair of boots, she made her way to the woods once more. The forest was alive with sounds: the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of night birds, and the occasional snap of a branch. But one sound rose above the rest: the haunting, mournful howl that sent shivers down her spine. Sophia followed it, her heart pounding as she pushed deeper into the woods. The trees thinned as she approached a familiar clearing, the moonlight casting everything in sharp, silvery contrast. And there he was. Marcus stood in the center of the clearing, his head tilted back as he gazed at the full moon. His coat was folded neatly on a nearby rock, and his chest rose and fell with deep, labored breaths. Sophia hesitated, ducking behind a tree to watch. The air seemed to shimmer around him, and as the seconds ticked by, his body began to change. The transformation was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Bones shifted and elongated, muscles rippled beneath his skin, and dark fur sprouted along his arms and shoulders. His face contorted, jaw elongating into a muzzle, teeth sharp and glinting in the moonlight. But what struck Sophia most was the pain etched into his expression. This wasn't a man reveling in his power, it was a man caught in a battle with himself. Suddenly, Marcus froze, his golden eyes snapping toward the tree where Sophia hid. "I know you re there," he growled, his voice a deep rumble that sent tremors through the air. Sophia stepped out from behind the tree, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Marcus, you shouldn't have come," he said, his voice strained as his body fought the change. "I warned you." "I had to," she said, taking a cautious step forward. "I need to understand." "There's nothing to understand," he snarled, the words punctuated by a low, guttural growl. "Go home, Sophia." "Now." "No," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I am not leaving you like this." His growl deepened and he took a step toward her, his movements fluid and predatory. For a moment, she thought he might attack, but then he stopped, his claws sinking into the earth as he fought for control. "Please," he said, his voice raw with desperation. "I don't want to hurt you." Sophia's heart ached at the anguish in his voice. "You won tea. You don't know that," he snapped, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "You don't know what I am capable of." "Maybe I don't," she admitted, taking another step closer. "But I know who you are, Marcus. You wouldn't hurt me." His body trembled, his claws raking the ground as he let out a frustrated snarl. "You re a fool." "Maybe," she said softly, her voice carrying over the tension in the air, "but I didn't care." Marcus turned away, his broad shoulders heaving as he fought to control the beast within. Sophia took the opportunity to close the distance between them, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. The moment her fingers brushed his fur, he froze. The connection sent a jolt through her, a strange warmth that seemed to hum beneath her skin. Marcus turned his head, his glowing eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name: fear, longing, and something deeper, more primal. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Because I care," she said, her voice breaking, "and I am not afraid of you." For a moment, the tension in his body eased and he leaned into her touch. But the moment was short-lived. The sound of a distant howl shattered the silence and Marcus pulled away, his expression hardening. "You need to go," he said, his voice urgent. "Marcus, now," he growled, his voice a thunderous command. Before she could argue, he turned and sprinted into the woods, his massive form disappearing into the shadows. Sophia stood there for what felt like an eternity, her mind reeling. The warmth of his fur lingered on her hand, a reminder that Marcus was more than just a beast, he was a man caught between two worlds. When she finally made her way back to the shop, the first rays of dawn were breaking through the trees. Exhausted but determined, she sat down at her workbench and began sketching out a bouquet. This one wasn't tea for a customer. It was for Marcus. White roses for hope, lavender for devotion, and a single red amaryllis, a flower that symbolized strength through adversity. As she arranged the flowers, she couldn't help but wonder, would he let her in, or was she destined to be another fleeting piece of his carefully guarded world? Chapter 4. A dangerous truth. The bouquet sat on the counter like a silent declaration, its delicate blooms contrasting the storm brewing in Sophia's mind. She stared at it, her fingers absently tracing the ribbon she'd tied around the base. Would Marcus even accept it? Or would he see it as an intrusion, another crack in the walls he had built to keep her out? The bell above the door jingled, and Sophia's heart leapt. Marcus walked in, his presence as commanding as ever. He paused in the doorway, his gaze landing on her and then shifting to the bouquet. His expression darkened immediately. "What is that?" he asked, his tone sharp. Sophia straightened, summoning her courage. "It's for you. I don't need flowers." "It's not about needing them," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It's about what they mean." His jaw tightened, but he didn't move. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator where she stored the freshest blooms. Marcus, she said, stepping closer, I know you're trying to protect me. But I can keep pretending that I don't know what's going on. I saw you, and I need to understand. His silver eyes locked onto hers, unreadable and unrelenting. What do you think you understand? I know you re. Not entirely human, she said, the words feeling surreal as they left her lips. And I know you re scared I'll get hurt because of it. Marcus let out a low, humorless laugh. Scared? No, I am certain you'll get hurt. That's why you need to stay away. What makes you so sure? Because everyone does, he snapped, the rawness in his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Sophia's breath hitched. She hadn't expected that, and the pain in his eyes made her chest ache. I am not everyone, Marcus. He looked away, his shoulders tense. You don't understand what you re-inviting into your life, Sophia. This thing that I am, it's not just a curse. It's a death sentence for anyone who gets too close. Then explain it to me, she pleaded. Tell me the truth. Marcus hesitated, the internal battle evident on his face. Finally, he sighed and leaned against the counter, his fingers tracing the edge of the bouquet. Fine, he said, his voice low. But don't say I didn't warn you. They sat in the back of the shop where Sophia kept a small table for breaks. The space was cozy, filled with the scent of flowers and herbs. Marcus didn't touch his tea, instead staring at the steam as if it held the answers to the questions she hadn't yet asked. It started centuries ago, he began. My family was part of a small village, simple people, living off the land. But there was a flower, a rare bloom that grew in the forest nearby. It was said to have magical properties, healing, protection, even immortality. Sophia leaned forward, hanging on his every word. My ancestor, Aldrich, was a hunter. He found the flower and brought it back to the village, thinking it would help. But he didn't realize the flower was protected by a powerful spirit, a guardian bound to the forest. By taking the bloom, he broke a sacred bond. Marcus paused, his hands tightening into fists. The guardian cursed him and his bloodline, binding us to the moon. Every full moon, we lose control. We become something wild, something dangerous. Can the curse be broken? Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus shook his head. Not easily. The only way is to return the flower to its rightful place, but the guardian has hidden it deep within the forest, protected by magic and creatures far stronger than I am. So you've tried? He nodded. For years. But the curse, it doesn't just bind us to the moon, it also makes us a target. There are hunters, people who track creatures like me. Some of them just want to kill us, but others. His voice trailed off, a shadow passing over his face. Others what? They want the flower, he said finally. They think they can use its power for themselves, and they're willing to kill anyone who stands in their way. Sophia's stomach churned. Have they come after you? Yes, his voice was grim. They've already taken enough from me. My family, my friends, anyone who tried to help me. The weight of his words pressed down on her, but instead of fear, Sophia felt a fierce determination rise within her. You're not alone anymore, she said softly. Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and something close to hope. Sophia, I am serious, she interrupted. You've been carrying this burden by yourself for too long. Let me help you. You don't know what you're saying, he said, shaking his head. These hunters, they want to stop. If they find out you're involved, they'll come for you too. Then let them, she said, her voice firm. I want to run away just because it's dangerous. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair, a weary smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You're stubborn. I've been told that before. His smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet resignation. If you're serious about this, you need to understand what you're getting into. This isn't a storybook. There's no guarantee we'll survive. I'll take my chances, Sophia said, reaching across the table to take his hand. His skin was warm now, and the simple gesture sent a spark through her. Marcus stared at her hand on his expression softening. For the first time, the walls around him seemed to crack, revealing a man who was tired of fighting alone. All right, he said finally, his voice barely audible. But if we do this, there's no turning back. Sophia nodded, her resolve unshaken. Good, because I wasn't planning to. That night, as she watched Marcus disappear into the woods once more, Sophia felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She had crossed a line one that couldn't be uncrossed, and there was no telling where it would lead. But one thing was certain, she wasn't going to let him face his demons alone. Chapter 5, Whispers in the Pines the morning after Marcus's revelation. Sophia stood in the greenhouse behind her flower shop, hands buried in the soil of a potted lavender plant. The familiar rhythm of gardening usually calmed her, but today, her thoughts churned like a storm-tossed sea. She couldn't stop replaying Marcus's words, the hunters one stop. If they find out you re-involved, they'll come for you too. Her resolve hadn't wavered, but the weight of what she'd taken on was beginning to settle in. This wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about survival and something more she didn't dare to name yet. A sharp knock on the shop's back door startled her. Sophia wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door to find a tall man in his late 30s leaning against the frame. His build was solid, his face weathered, and his smile bordered on friendly, though his eyes held a calculating gleam. "Morning," he said, tipping an imaginary hat. "Name's Tobias. You must be Sophia." She hesitated, gripping the edge of the door. "That's me." "Can I help you?" "Well, that depends." Tobias stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his gaze sweeping the room. "I am new in town, doing some research on the area, thought you might be able to help me out." Sophia's stomach twisted. "What kind of research?" "Wolves," Tobias said, his tone casual. He turned to face her, his smile sharpening. "I hear you've got quite a few running around these woods. Some of them unusual." Sophia's heartbeat quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I am not sure what you mean." Tobias chuckled, folding his arms. "Come on now, Miss Sophia. A small town like this, people talk. And I've heard some interesting stories about things that go bump in the night. I run a flower shop," she said, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. "If you looking for ghost stories, you in the wrong place." "Maybe," Tobias said, leaning closer. "But something tells me you not the type to scare easily." "Am I right?" Sophia clenched her jaw, refusing to let him see her fear. "I think you should leave." Tobias's smile faded, his expression hardening. "Here's the thing, Sophia. I am not just passing through. I am here for a reason. If you know something about what's out there, it'd be smart to share." "I don't know anything," she said firmly, stepping aside to open the door. Tobias studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. Then he shrugged and walked out, pausing on the threshold. "If you change your mind, I'll be around. Just don't wait too long. Things have a way of getting messy when folks keep secrets." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Sophia shaken but resolute. That evening, she found Marcus waiting in the woods near her shop. He leaned against a tree, his silhouette sharp in the twilight, and turned as she approached. "What's wrong?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as he took in her expression. Sophia hesitated, but there was no point in hiding it. "A man came to the shop today, Tobias. He's looking for wolves, and he knows more than he's letting on." Marcus stiffened, his jaw tightening. "What did he say?" "He wanted information. Tried to act friendly at first, but it was clear he wasn't just curious." "He knows something, Marcus, maybe about you." Marcus let out a low growl, the sound vibrating through the air. "He's a hunter." "Are you sure?" "Yes." His voice was cold, sharp. "I've met men like him before. They always start with questions, acting like they just passing through. Then they dig deeper. By the time you realize what they after, it's too late." Sophia's stomach dropped. "What do we do?" Marcus arched a brow, but his expression softened at her determined look. "You stay out of it. I'll deal with him." "No," she said firmly. "You not doing this alone." "Sophia, no," she repeated, cutting him off. "He came to me, Marcus. That makes me a part of this whether you like it or not." Marcus's hands clenched into fists, but he didn't argue. Instead, he paced the clearing, his movements restless and tense. Tobias one T stop until he finds what he looking for, he said finally. And if he suspects you reconnected to me, he'll use you to get to me. Then we need to be smarter than him, Sophia said. A faint smile tugged at Marcus's lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. You re braver than I gave you credit for. I am starting to think you underestimated me, she replied, crossing her arms. He chuckled softly, the sound tinged with bitterness. Maybe I did. Over the next few days, Marcus kept his distance, but Sophia knew he was watching. She felt his presence in the shadows, the faint scent of pine and earth lingering when she stepped outside. Tobias, too, remained a quiet but looming threat. He lingered in the town square, striking up conversations with locals and always keeping an eye on her shop. His presence was a reminder of the danger closing in, but Sophia refused to let fear dictate her actions. She began researching the hunters Marcus had mentioned, scouring old books and local folklore for clues. The stories were fragmented half-truths and myths, but they all pointed to the same conclusion: hunters had been chasing creatures like Marcus for centuries, driven by greed, fear, and the promise of power. One evening, as Sophia pored over an old book in her apartment, a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Marcus standing there, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he said. "What's going on?" "Tobias," Marcus said, stepping inside. "He has been asking questions about you." Sophia's breath caught. "What kind of questions?" "He wants to know why you re so interested in the woods, why you spend time out there." Marcus hesitated, his eyes darkening. "He's trying to connect the dots, Sophia, and if he figures it out." "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her resolve. Marcus looked at her, his gaze heavy with unspoken emotions. "We fight back. But if we going to do this, you need to be ready for what's coming." "I am ready," Sophia said, meeting his eyes. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let us make sure Tobias knows exactly who he's dealing with." As the moon rose higher in the sky, Sophia felt a shift within herself, a quiet but unshakable certainty. She wasn't the same person she'd been a few weeks ago, and she wasn't afraid of the fight ahead. Chapter 6. The Wolf and the Florist. Sophia spent the next day at the shop, her mind racing with strategies and questions. Marcus had agreed to meet her after closing to discuss their next move against Tobias, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. Her hands moved automatically, arranging a bouquet for a customer who barely glanced up from their phone. The bell over the door jingled as they left, and she was alone again in the quiet shop. The sun dipped below the horizon as Sophia locked the front door, flipping the sign to closed. She turned back toward the counter, and there he was, Marcus, standing in the corner of the room like a shadow come to life. "Do you ever use the door?" she asked, her tone more teasing than annoyed. His lips quirked into a faint smile. "Not when I can help it." Despite herself, Sophia's heart gave a small flutter. Marcus had that effect, effortless and unintentional. He looked at her now with a seriousness that chased away any fleeting warmth. "You said you wanted to fight back," he said, his voice low. "That wasn't just talk, was it?" "No," Sophia said firmly, "I meant it." Marcus nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Then you need to know what you're up against." He gestured for her to sit, and she pulled up a stool behind the counter as he leaned against the workbench. For a moment, he said nothing, his hands resting on the edge as if bracing himself. "Tobias isn't just a hunter," Marcus began. "He's part of a network, a group of people who've been hunting supernatural creatures for generations. They're not all in it for the same reasons. Some see it as a duty, others as sport. But Tobias, he's after something specific. The flower," Sophia guessed. Marcus nodded. "It's called the Luna Bloom, a rare, magical plant that only grows under the light of a full moon in certain places. It's what cursed my family, and it's what can break the curse. But it's also a weapon, one that hunters like Tobias would kill to possess." Sophia frowned, leaning forward. "Why would he need it?" "The Luna Bloom's power can be twisted," Marcus said. "In the right hands, it heals. In the wrong hands, it destroys. Tobias knows that, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to find it. The weight of his words settled over Sophia like a shroud. So he's not just hunting you, he's hunting the flower. Yes, Marcus said grimly. And if he finds it, the consequences won't just be mine to bear. Sophia let the silence linger for a moment, absorbing everything he told her. Then she squared her shoulders. Then we can let him find it. Marcus's eyes softened, a flicker of admiration breaking through his guarded expression. You're not afraid, are you? I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, she admitted. But fear's not going to stop me. He straightened, his posture tense but resolute. Good, because there's something I need to show you. Sophia followed Marcus into the woods, the air crisp and heavy with the scent of pine. The moon was a pale crescent tonight, offering just enough light to guide their path. Marcus moved with the grace of a predator, his footsteps silent on the forest floor. Sophia struggled to keep up, her breath visible in the cool night air. Where are we going? She asked, breaking the silence. To a place I haven't shown anyone, Marcus said without turning. It's where I go when I need to think, and where I've hidden the clues to finding the Luna bloom. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. You mean you know where it is? Not exactly, he said, slowing his pace as they approached a small clearing. But I know how to find it. The clearing was beautiful and eerie all at once. In the center stood a large, twisted tree with bark as black as night and leaves that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Around its base were clusters of small, silvery flowers that glowed faintly in the dark. What is this place? Sophia whispered, stepping closer. The moon's veil, Marcus said. It's a sacred spot connected to the Luna bloom. The flowers here are fragments of its power, like echoes of the original. Sophia knelt to touch one of the silvery petals, her fingers tingling as they brushed the delicate surface. It's beautiful. It's also dangerous, Marcus said, his voice tinged with warning. The magic here is unpredictable. That's why hunters like Tobias haven't found it yet. They can feel the pull like I can. Sophia looked up at him. You reconnected to it, aren't you? Because of the curse, he nodded. It's like a compass pointing me in the right direction. But it's not perfect. The closer I get to the Luna bloom, the stronger the pull and the stronger the risks. What kind of risks? Marcus hesitated, his gaze dark. Losing control. The magic doesn't just guide me, it tempts me. If I get too close without the right precautions, I could change. Permanently. Sophia's chest tightened. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen. It's not that simple, he said, his voice heavy. The last time I tried, I barely made it back. Sophia rose to her feet, determination hardening her features. But you're not alone this time. Marcus stared at her, his golden eyes searching hers for a long moment. Finally, he let out a soft sigh, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Nope, she said, a hint of a grin breaking through her seriousness. Then let us make a deal, Marcus said, stepping closer. His voice lowered, and the intensity in his gaze sent a shiver down her spine. If this gets too dangerous, you promise me you'll walk away. Sophia opened her mouth to argue, but he held up a hand. Promise me, Sophia, he said firmly. I won't let you risk your life for this. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but only if you promise to let me help you. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by a quiet chuckle. Fair enough. They stood in the clearing, the faint glow of the silvery flowers casting soft light around them. For the first time since this ordeal began, Sophia felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Chapter 7 Bouquets of Meaning. The morning after their visit to the moon's veil, Sophia arrived at the shop early, her thoughts consumed by the tangled mess of magic, curses, and danger she stepped into. The familiarity of her flower shop was a stark contrast to the dark, otherworldly forest where Marcus had revealed the truth about the Luna bloom. As she worked on a new display of wildflowers near the front window, she couldn't help but think of Marcus. His warning from the night before echoed in her mind. If this gets too dangerous, you promise me you'll walk away. but walking away had never been an option, not since she saw him transform under the moonlight. The doorbell chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. A customer stepped inside, a young woman with wide eyes and a nervous energy. "Hi," the woman said, glancing around the shop. "I need something special, something that says, 'I am sorry, but I am also hoping for a fresh start.'" Sophia smiled gently. "I think I can help with that. Are there any flowers you'd like to include?" The woman hesitated, then shook her head. "I trust your judgment." As Sophia began gathering blooms, arranging a mix of white tulips for forgiveness and daisies for new beginnings, she couldn't help but think of Marcus. The way he ordered bouquets with such care and precision, each arrangement a silent message that hinted at the depth of his emotions. The woman left with her bouquet, her smile a little brighter than when she arrived, and Sophia returned to the workbench, her thoughts lingering on Marcus. He never explicitly said who the flowers were for, but she was certain now. They had been for her. Later that evening, Marcus came to the shop just as she was locking up. The fading sunlight cast a golden glow over his features, softening the sharp edges of his usual guarded expression. "You late," Sophia teased, folding her arms as he approached. "I am always late," he replied with a faint smirk. "Good thing I am patient." Marcus tilted his head, studying her. "You've been busy," he said, nodding toward the bouquet of white tulips and daisies still sitting on the counter. "Customer this morning," she explained. "Someone looking for a fresh start." His expression shifted slightly, and Sophia wondered if he caught the unspoken message behind her words. "Is that what you're looking for?" he asked after a moment. Sophia hesitated, then smiled softly. "Maybe, but I think it's what we're looking for." Marcus's gaze held hers, his silver eyes flickering with something she couldn't quite name. "You're relentless, you know that? Only when it's important." He huffed a soft laugh, shaking his head. "Come on, I want to show you something." Sophia followed Marcus deeper into the woods than she had ever gone before. The air grew cooler, and the dense canopy above filtered the moonlight into faint streaks that danced across the forest floor. "Where are we going?" she asked, her breath visible in the crisp night air. "There's a path ahead," Marcus said, his voice low. "It'll take us to an old hunting lodge. The hunters used it years ago, but it's abandoned now." Sophia frowned. "Why are we going there?" "Because Tobias won't stay quiet for long," Marcus said, glancing back at her. "If he's serious about finding the Luna bloom, he'll need a base. The lodge is the most likely place he'll set up." Sophia quickened her pace to match his. "What if he's already there? Then we'll know where to start." The lodge came into view just as the moon peeked through a break in the clouds. It was a weathered structure, its roof sagging in places and its windows dark. The surrounding area was overgrown with weeds and vines, giving it the appearance of a place forgotten by time. Marcus motioned for Sophia to stay back as he crept closer, his movements silent and deliberate. She crouched behind a cluster of bushes, watching as he scanned the area. After a moment, he waved her forward. "It's empty," he said as she joined him, "but there are signs someone's been here recently." Sophia followed him inside, her footsteps crunching on the scattered debris that littered the floor. The air smelled of damp wood and decay, and the faint light from the moon barely reached the corners of the room. Marcus pointed to a table near the center of the lodge. On it were maps, notes, and an array of strange objects: silver-tipped arrows, vials of a dark liquid, and what appeared to be a journal. Sophia picked up the journal, flipping through its pages. The handwriting was neat but hurried, filled with sketches of flowers, diagrams, and cryptic notes. "This is it," she said, holding up the journal. "This is Tobias S." Marcus moved to her side, his expression grim as he scanned the pages. "He's close," he muttered. "Too close." Sophia's fingers brushed a loose page tucked into the back of the journal. Pulling it free, she unfolded it to reveal a detailed map of the forest. A red X marked a spot near the moon's veil. "He knows," she whispered, her heart sinking. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we have to move fast. If Tobias reaches the Luna bloom before we do, he won tea," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her chest. "We 1T let him." Marcus looked at her, his silver eyes softening. "You're putting yourself in danger for me again." For us, she corrected, her gaze unwavering. For a moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand in his. The touch was warm, grounding her in the midst of the chaos. "Thank you," he said quietly. Sophia squeezed his hand. "We'll figure this out, Marcus. Together." As they left the lodge, the journal tucked securely under Marcus's arm, Sophia felt a sense of urgency coursing through her. Tobias was closer than they realized, and the race to the Luna Bloom had truly begun. But she wasn't afraid. With Marcus by her side, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 8. The Silver Thorn. The journal sat on the counter in Sophia's flower shop, its pages spread open beneath the glow of a desk lamp. Marcus stood nearby, his arms crossed as he scanned the maps and notes, his jaw set in a grim line. "This confirms it," he said, tapping the red X on the map. "Tobias knows the general location of the Luna Bloom. If he gets there before us..." Sophia frowned, her fingers brushing the edge of the page. "We have to stop him. But how do we even get there before he does?" "I know a way," Marcus said. "There's an old path through the woods, one the hunters don't know about. It's dangerous, but it'll get us to the moon's veil faster." Sophia nodded, determination flickering in her chest. "Then we take it." Marcus hesitated, his gaze lingering on her. "You sure about this?" "You're not leaving me behind," she said firmly, meeting his eyes. "We in this together." He sighed, but didn't he argue. "Fine, but there's something else you need to know." Sophia arched a brow. "What is it?" Marcus moved to the other side of the counter, his expression dark. "The Silver Thorn." Sophia's pulse quickened. "What's that?" "It's a weapon," he explained. "Hunters use it against creatures like me. Tobias has one. If he catches me, he won't just kill me, he'll make it slow. Painful." The thought sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. "Then we can let him catch you." "Easier said than done," Marcus muttered, his eyes narrowing. "The Silver Thorn isn't just a weapon. It's laced with magic poisonous to anything tied to the Luna Bloom. One strike, and I'll lose control of my transformation. Maybe even permanently." Sophia swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her. "Then we need to be smart. Careful." Marcus nodded, though the tension in his posture didn't ease. "We leave tonight. Tobias is already moving, and we don't have time to waste." The forest was alive with the sounds of the night as they followed Marcus's hidden path. The air was cool and damp, the scent of moss and pine clinging to every breath. Sophia stayed close to Marcus, her flashlight cutting through the shadows as they navigated the uneven terrain. "Are you sure this is the right way?" she asked, glancing at the dense trees around them. "Positive," Marcus replied, his voice low. "This path leads straight to the moon's veil. Tobias won't know it exists." Sophia nodded, trusting his instincts. But as the hours passed and the forest grew darker, her nerves began to fray. Every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of a branch sent her heart racing. "Wait," Marcus said suddenly, holding up a hand. Sophia froze, her grip tightening on the flashlight. "What is it?" Marcus tilted his head, his sharp senses attuned to something she couldn't perceive. "We're not alone." The words sent a chill down her spine. She turned off her flashlight, plunging them into darkness as she strained to hear what Marcus had detected. A faint sound reached her ears, a low, rhythmic hum, like the distant buzz of insects. But as it grew louder, she realized it wasn't insects at all. "Magic," Marcus whispered, his tone grim. "Tobias is using a ward." "A ward?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a barrier," he explained. "He's trying to block us from reaching the moon's veil. We need to find a way around it." Sophia glanced around, her mind racing. "What happens if we cross it?" "Best case, it disorients us," Marcus said. "Worst case, it kills us." "Great," Sophia muttered, her heart pounding. "So what do we do?" Marcus crouched, pressing his hand to the ground. He closed his eyes, his expression tense as he concentrated. "There," he said after a moment, pointing to a gap in the trees. "The ward is weakest in that direction. We can break through if we be careful." Sophia nodded, following him as they moved toward the gap. The hum of the ward grew louder, a pulsing energy that made the air feel thick and heavy. As they stepped closer, Marcus turned to her, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Stay close to me. No matter what happens." Dante let go of my hand. Sophia reached for his hand without hesitation, her fingers intertwining with his. "I am not going anywhere." Together, they stepped through the gap. The moment they crossed the ward, a wave of nausea rolled over Sophia. The air shimmered around them, distorting the trees and sky into a swirling blur. She gripped Marcus's hand tightly, focusing on his presence to ground herself. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. They pushed forward, the energy of the ward pressing against them like an invisible tide. Sophia's head pounded, and her vision blurred, but she refused to stop. Finally, they stumbled through to the other side. The air cleared and the forest snapped back into focus. Sophia doubled over, gasping for breath. "What was that?" "The ward's magic," Marcus said, his voice strained. "It's designed to repel anything connected to the Luna bloom. You're lucky it didn't hit you harder." Sophia straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. "And you?" "I am fine," Marcus said, though his pale face and tight jaw told a different story. Sophia didn't press him. Instead, she glanced around, realizing the forest had changed. The trees were larger here, their trunks gnarled and ancient. The air felt charged with energy, as if the land itself was alive. "We re close, aren't we?" she asked. Marcus nodded, his gaze scanning the shadows. Too close. A sudden rustle in the underbrush made them both freeze. Marcus stepped in front of her, his posture tense and ready. The figure that emerged from the shadows sent a jolt of fear through Sophia's chest. Tobias stood there, a cruel smile on his face and a silver-tipped arrow knocked in his bow. "Well, isn't he this cozy?" Tobias said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Marcus growled low in his throat, his body coiled like a spring. "Tobias, leave now and I want to kill you." Tobias laughed. Bold words for a dead man walking. Sophia's heart pounded as Tobias raised the bow, the arrow glinting in the moonlight. She knew what it meant, the silver thorn. "Marcus, Dante," she whispered, sensing the tension radiating off him. But Marcus didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, his body shifting mid-leap as he transformed into the wolf. The battle had begun. Chapter 9, Bonds Forged in Shadows. The sound of Marcus's transformation was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Bones snapping, sinews stretching, his human form giving way to the hulking, feral shape of a wolf. His black fur bristled under the moonlight, his glowing eyes fixed on Tobias with lethal intent. Tobias didn't flinch. He released the arrow with a sharp twang, the silver thorn cutting through the air with deadly precision. "Marcus!" Sophia screamed. Marcus dodged, his massive form moving with impossible speed. The arrow grazed his shoulder, but he barely seemed to notice as he closed the distance between himself and Tobias in a single bound. The hunter rolled out of the way, narrowly avoiding Marcus's claws. Tobias moved with practiced agility, his movements quick and calculated, but Marcus's sheer power made every encounter a gamble. Sophia pressed herself against a tree, her heart hammering as she watched the deadly dance unfold. The forest echoed with growls, the clash of claws against steel, and Tobias's mocking taunts. "You think you can stop me, beast?" Tobias snarled, pulling another arrow from his quiver. "You're nothing but a rabid dog." Marcus let out a deafening snarl, lunging for the bow. His jaws snapped inches from Tobias's hand, forcing the hunter to drop the weapon and roll backward. Sophia's eyes darted to the discarded bow, and without thinking, she bolted from her hiding spot. "Sophia, no," Marcus growled, his voice distorted by the wolf's form. She ignored him, diving for the bow and grabbing it just as Tobias turned toward her. The hunter's eyes narrowed, and he lunged, but Marcus intercepted him, slamming him to the ground with enough force to rattle the earth. "Stay down," Marcus snarled, his claws pressing against Tobias's throat. Tobias didn't comply. With a sudden burst of strength, he shoved Marcus off and scrambled to his feet, drawing a long silver blade from his belt. The blade shimmered with an eerie light, its edge razor sharp. "Enough games," Tobias hissed, his eyes blazing with fury. Sophia clutched the bow tightly, her mind racing. Marcus couldn't take another hit from the silver thorn or that blade. She had to do something. "Tobias," she shouted, her voice ringing through the clearing. The hunter turned toward her, his eyes narrowing. "Ah," the florist. "You should be stayed in your little shop, sweetheart." Sophia's grip tightened on the bow. "And you should be stayed out of my woods." Tobias laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. Brave words for someone so out of their depth. Marcus moved to intervene, but Tobias raised the blade, forcing him to stop. "Ah, mutt," Tobias said, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "One step closer, and I'll cut her down instead." Sophia's blood ran cold, but she refused to back down. "You won't touch me," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "You too focused on the Luna Bloom to waste time on me." Tobias's grin faltered, his eyes flicking to the journal tucked into Marcus's belt. "Clever girl," he said slowly, "but you don't understand what you're dealing with. That flower is worth more than your life or his." Sophia's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "You're wrong. The Luna Bloom isn't just some prize to be won. It's tied to Marcus, to his life, his family. You don't deserve it." Tobias's face twisted with rage. And what would a florist know about deserving anything? Before he could react, Sophia raised the bow and swung it like a club, the wooden frame striking Tobias's arm with enough force to knock the blade from his hand. Marcus didn't hesitate. With a feral snarl, he lunged, his massive form colliding with Tobias and pinning him to the ground. This time, Marcus didn't hold back. His claws tore through Tobias's coat and his teeth snapped inches from the hunter's face. "Enough," Tobias gasped, struggling against Marcus's weight. Marcus growled low in his throat, his golden eyes burning with fury. "You'll leave, now, and if I don't," Tobias spat. Sophia stepped forward, her voice cold. "Then you'll answer to both of us." For a moment, Tobias seemed to consider his options. Then he let out a bitter laugh, his body going limp under Marcus's hold. "Fine," he said. "You've won this round." Marcus released him with a warning snarl, stepping back to stand beside Sophia. Tobias rose slowly, his face pale but defiant. "This isn't over," he said, his gaze flicking between them. "You can protect the flower forever, and when the time comes, I'll be there to claim it." Sophia met his glare with one of her own. "We'll be ready." Tobias didn't respond. He retrieved his blade and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the clearing eerily quiet. When they were alone again, Marcus shifted back to his human form, his breathing ragged. He staggered slightly, and Sophia caught him, her arms wrapping around his waist. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with worry. "I'll live," Marcus muttered, wincing as he touched the wound on his shoulder. Sophia guided him to a fallen log, forcing him to sit. "Let me see," she said, kneeling beside him. "It's just a scratch," Marcus said, though the pain in his voice betrayed him. Sophia ignored his protests, examining the wound. The skin around the gash was red and swollen, and the faint shimmer of the silver thorn's poison lingered in the air. "This isn't just a scratch," she said, frowning. "We need to treat this before it gets worse." Marcus met her gaze, his silver eyes softening. "You don't have to do this, Sophia." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "You're not in this alone anymore." A faint smile tugged at his lips, and for a moment, the tension between them melted away. "Thank you," he said quietly. Sophia's heart swelled with determination. Tobias might have escaped, but they weren't done yet. Together, they would find the Luna Bloom and protect it from anyone who dared to take it. Tsaye ikrat kuri cyrillicletter 456 stem oje pe o u sha uve a te un a sha cyrillicletter 456 pe a ve el a ve ka o us te a n ya. Ya cash cha o me pe o us ya. Pe o ve cyrillicletter 456 de o te yo n a s pe o tse ya. Pe o s te a ve sha tse cyrillicletter 456 ikrat kuri ve cyrillicletter 456 de pe o ve cyrillicletter 456 de cyrillicletter 456 pe a el tse yeri un ize. Chapter 10. A howl in the dark. The trip back to Sophia's shop was a tense one. The forest, so alive with danger moments earlier, now seemed oppressively silent, the shadows deeper and the air heavier. Marcus leaned on Sophia more than he would have liked, his steps uneven as the poison from the silver thorns seeped through his body. Just a little further, Sophia murmured, her voice steady despite her concern. Marcus grunted in acknowledgement, though his jaw was clenched and his face had grown pale. By the time they reached the shop, he was barely able to stand. Sophia guided him inside, locking the door behind them and pulling the shades down over the windows. "Sit," she commanded, guiding him to the small couch in the break room. "I am fine," Marcus said, though his shaking hands betrayed him. "You re not," she snapped, grabbing her first aid kit. "So stop pretending you re invincible and let me help you." Marcus's eyes softened at her tone, and he nodded, sinking back against the cushions. Sophia knelt beside him, peeling away the torn fabric of his shirt to reveal the wound. The gash was jagged and deep, the edges blackened by the poison. Her stomach twisted, but she forced herself to stay calm. "This might sting," she said, dabbing a cloth with an herbal tincture she kept for emergencies. Marcus winced as she pressed it to the wound. "Where do you learn to do this?" "My grandmother," she said, focusing on her work. "She taught me about plants, what they can heal, what they can harm. I guess it stuck." "You've got a talent," Marcus murmured, his voice softer now. Sophia glanced up at him, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. His silver eyes were fixed on her, and for a moment the tension between them faded into something warmer, something unspoken. "Don't distract me," she said with a small smile, turning back to his wound. Marcus chuckled weakly. Noted, by the time she finished, the bleeding had stopped and Marcus's breathing had evened out. He leaned back against the couch, his exhaustion evident, but the dangerous pallor in his face had faded. "How do you feel?" Sophia asked, sitting back on her heels. "Better," Marcus admitted. "Thanks to you." She smiled, relief washing over her. "Good." "Because we re not done yet." Marcus raised a brow. "Tobias is gone for now. We have time to regroup." "Do we?" Sophia countered, standing and crossing her arms. "He knows about the Luna bloom, and he has the silver thorn. We can wait for him to make the next move." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "You right. But we can rush into this blind either. The closer we get to the bloom, the more dangerous it'll be." Sophia frowned, her mind racing. "Then we need a plan. Something Tobias 1T expect." Marcus leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "There's one thing we can use to our advantage." "What's that?" "The bloom's magic," he said. "It's tied to me my bloodline. Tobias might be able to track its location, but he doesn't have the connection I do. If we can get to the bloom first, we can secure it before he does. And stop him from using it," Sophia added. "Exactly." Sophia nodded, determination hardening her resolve. "Then we start at dawn. You'll need to rest, and I'll prepare supplies." Marcus hesitated, his eyes lingering on her. "Sophia." "What?" "I need you to be careful," he said, his voice heavy with unspoken emotions. "This isn't just about finding the bloom. The closer we get, the more the magic will affect me. If something happens, nothing's going to happen," she interrupted firmly. "We'll get through this together, Marcus. I promise." For a moment, he looked as though he wanted to argue, but then he nodded, his shoulders relaxing. "All right. Together." The hours until dawn passed in a blur of preparation. Sophia packed essentials, water, food, and the herbal remedies her grandmother had taught her to make while Marcus rested. She checked on him periodically, relieved to see the color returning to his face as he slept. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, they were ready to leave. Marcus led the way, his pace steady despite the lingering effects of the poison. Sophia followed close behind, her senses heightened as they ventured deeper into the forest. The path to the Luna Bloom was treacherous, marked by uneven terrain and thick underbrush. The air grew heavier the closer they got, charged with an energy that prickled at Sophia's skin. "It's close," Marcus said, his voice low. Sophia nodded, her grip tightening on the straps of her pack. "How will we know when we've found it?" "You'll know," Marcus said. "The Bloom's magic is unmistakable." They pressed on, the forest growing darker despite the rising sun. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled branches twisting together like skeletal hands. A low growl suddenly broke the silence, and Marcus froze, his body tense. "What is it?" Sophia whispered. "We're not alone," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the shadows. Sophia's heart pounded as she followed his gaze, her grip tightening on the small knife she carried. The growling grew louder, and then, out of the shadows, a pair of glowing red eyes appeared. A massive wolf stepped into view, its fur as black as night and its teeth bared in a snarl. Behind it, more shapes emerged, their eyes gleaming with the same malevolent light. "They guardians," Marcus said, his voice grim. "Protectors of the Luna Bloom." Sophia's throat tightened. "Can we get past them?" "We'll have to," Marcus said, his body already shifting as he prepared for the fight. As his transformation completed, he turned to Sophia, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "Stay behind me," he growled. "No matter what happens." Sophia nodded, her fear overshadowed by determination. She wasn't about to let him face this alone. The guardians lunged, and the battle began. Chapter 11. The Garden's refuge. The forest exploded into chaos as the guardians surged forward. Marcus met the first wolf mid-lunge, his massive form colliding with the creature in a blur of teeth and claws. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, shaking the ground beneath Sophia's feet. Her heart thundered as she ducked behind a thick tree trunk, clutching her knife with trembling hands. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't leave Marcus, not now, not ever. Marcus fought like a force of nature. His movements were feral yet precise, each swipe of his claws and snap of his jaws calculated to disable rather than destroy. But for every guardian he felled, another emerged from the shadows, their glowing red eyes unyielding. Sophia. Marcus's voice, half human, half wolf, rang out above the fray. "Go, find the bloom. I am not leaving you," she shouted back, stepping out from her hiding spot. Her defiance was met with a low growl from Marcus, but he didn't argue further, too occupied with fending off the relentless onslaught. Sophia scanned the clearing, her eyes searching for anything that might resemble the Luna Bloom. The energy in the air was almost suffocating now, a pulsing rhythm that seemed to resonate with her heartbeat. There! Her gaze locked onto a faint glow in the distance, a silvery light emanating from a cluster of vines wrapped around the base of an ancient tree. Sophia bolted toward it, weaving through the chaos as Marcus fought to keep the guardians at bay. The closer she got, the stronger the pull of the Bloom's magic became, its presence both alluring and overwhelming. Reaching the base of the tree, she fell to her knees, her breath catching as she beheld the Luna Bloom. It was breathtaking, a single flower with petals that shimmered like liquid moonlight, its glow illuminating the twisted roots around it. But as her fingers hovered above the bloom, a deafening snarl tore through the air. Sophia whipped around to see Marcus pinned beneath two guardians, their teeth sinking into his shoulder and side. Blood matted his fur, and his growls of defiance were weaker now, tinged with pain. "Marcus!" she screamed, scrambling to her feet. Before she could move, a hand closed around her arm, yanking her back. "Well, isn't this a sight?" Tobias sneered, his grip tightening. His silver-tipped blade glinted in the Bloom's light as he dragged her away from the flower. the brave little florist, meddling where she doesn't belong. "Let me go." Sophia struggled against him, but his hold was ironclad. "Not a chance," Tobias hissed. "You're going to watch as I finish this, and then I'll take the bloom for myself." He raised the blade, aiming it at Marcus, who was still struggling beneath the weight of the guardians. "No," Sophia cried, panic surging through her veins. Tobias ignored her, stepping forward with deadly intent. Desperation gave Sophia strength. She twisted in his grip, her free hand reaching for the pouch of herbs she tucked into her pocket. She grabbed a handful of the powder and threw it into Tobias's face. He recoiled with a snarl, releasing her as he clawed at his eyes. "You little Sophia," didn't he wait for him to recover. She grabbed a fallen branch and swung it with all her might, striking Tobias in the side and knocking him to the ground. "Marcus," she shouted, running to his side. The guardians growled, their attention shifting to her as she knelt beside him. Her hand hovered over his bloodied fur, her chest tightening at the sight of his injuries. "You have to get up," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, Marcus." His golden eyes opened, weak but resolute. Sophia looked up as the guardians closed in, their snarls echoing in her ears. "Stay back," she yelled, her voice cracking. The ground beneath her began to hum, the same rhythm she felt earlier. The Luna Bloom's magic surged through the air, responding to her desperation. The guardians hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering as if uncertain. Sophia's mind raced. The bloom, can it stop them? She turned to Marcus, her heart pounding. "It's the flower," she said, her voice urgent. "It's protecting us, we have to use it." Marcus growled weakly, his gaze shifting toward the bloom. Sophia didn't wait for his approval. She scrambled back to the base of the tree and knelt before the Luna Bloom. Its glow intensified as she reached for it, the petals almost vibrating with energy. Her fingers brushed the flower, and a jolt of power shot through her, stealing her breath. Images flooded her mind, memories not her own. A forest alive with magic, a bloodline bound to the moon, a betrayal that sparked centuries of pain. And then, a choice. Sophia gasped, her hand trembling as she gripped the bloom. She turned back to Marcus, who was barely holding on. The guardians were closing in again, their hesitation fading. "Marcus," she cried, her voice breaking. "I can end this." His golden eyes met hers, and for a moment everything else disappeared. "Do it," he rasped. Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face as she pressed the bloom against her chest. The magic erupted, a blinding light engulfing the clearing. The guardians froze, their forms dissolving into mist as the power of the Luna Bloom swept through the forest. The air buzzed with energy, and then silence. When the light faded, Sophia collapsed to the ground, the bloom cradled in her hands. Marcus's human form lay a few feet away, motionless but alive. Tobias was gone, the forest eerily quiet in his absence. Sophia crawled to Marcus, her hands trembling as she touched his face. His eyes opened slowly, the silver replaced with a soft, familiar gray. "Sophia," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I am here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're safe." He reached up, his hand brushing her cheek. "You did it." "No," she whispered, her tears falling onto his skin. "We did it." As dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the forest in golden light, Sophia held Marcus close. The curse was broken, but the fight wasn't over. "Tse ye akrat kudi Cyrillic letter 456 stm oje ye pe o u sha u ve a te en a sha Cyrillic letter 456 pe a ve el a ve ka o est a n ya. Ya cash cha o me pe o mes ya. Pe o ve Cyrillic letter 456 de o te yo nas pe o tse ya. Pe o sta ve sha tse Cyrillic letter 456. Ikrat kudi ve Cyrillic letter 456 de pe o ve Cyrillic letter 456 de Cyrillic letter 456 pe a el tse yeri un ize. Chapter 12. Fangs and fury, the early morning sun filtered through the canopy, painting the forest in golden hues, but Sophia barely noticed. She sat on the ground with Marcus leaning against her, his weight heavy but comforting. The Luna Bloom's magic still lingered in the air, an almost electric charge that made her skin tingle. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, brushing a lock of dark hair from his forehead. Marcus managed a faint smile, though his expression was weary. "You're a terrible liar." Sophia laughed softly, the sound shaky. "You're stubborn enough to pull through." The sound of rustling leaves snapped her attention toward the tree line. Her heart leapt, and she gripped the small knife she still carried. "Marcus, someone's coming." He stirred, his muscles tensing despite his weakened state. "Help me up," he muttered. "Marcus, you're in no condition, help me," he repeated, his tone firmer. Sophia slipped her arm under his and helped him to his feet. He swayed slightly but remained standing, his jaw clenched against the pain. From the shadows emerged Tobias, his face twisted with fury and desperation. His coat was torn, his weapon gone, but his eyes burned with hatred as they locked onto Marcus and Sophia. "You think this is over?" Tobias spat, his voice venomous. "You think you've won." Sophia stepped forward, shielding Marcus despite her trembling hands. "The Bloom's magic stopped your guardians. It's over, Tobias. Leave before it's too late." Tobias's laughter was sharp and grating. "Too late for who?" "You don't understand what you've done." Marcus growled low in his throat, his golden eyes flashing. "She stopped you, Tobias. That's all that matters." "No," Tobias hissed, his gaze flicking toward the Luna Bloom still cradled in Sophia's hands. "That flower doesn't belong to you. Its power is too great for a mutt and a florist to wield." Marcus tensed, but Sophia held him back, her voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't about power, Tobias. It's about freedom. For Marcus, for his family, for the forest you've been tearing apart." Tobias sneered. "Freedom? Don't be naive. That flower is a weapon, and it will fall into the hands of someone stronger, someone willing to use it." "Not while we're here," Marcus growled. Tobias's expression darkened, and he reached for a dagger strapped to his thigh. "Then I'll just have to take it from you." Before Sophia could react, Tobias lunged. Time seemed to slow as Tobias closed the distance between them, his dagger gleaming in the morning light. Marcus moved instinctively, shoving Sophia aside as he intercepted the attack. The dagger plunged into Marcus's side, the blade sinking deep. A snarl tore from his throat as he grabbed Tobias by the wrist, twisting it with a sickening crack. The dagger clattered to the ground, and Marcus's claws raked across Tobias's chest, sending the hunter stumbling back. Sophia scrambled to her feet, her hands trembling as she clutched the Luna Bloom. She wanted to run to Marcus to help him, but Tobias wasn't finished. Bloodied and enraged, Tobias drew a second weapon from his belt, a short, silver-tipped spear that glinted with runes. "Marcus," Sophia screamed, but the warning came too late. Tobias thrust the spear toward Marcus, the runes flaring with an ominous light. Marcus dodged, but the spear's edge grazed his arm, leaving a deep, smoking wound. He snarled in pain, his body trembling as the curse's remnants fought against the Bloom's magic. "You're weaker than I thought," Tobias taunted, advancing. Sophia's fear gave way to fury. Gripping the Luna Bloom tightly, she stepped between Marcus and Tobias, her heart pounding. "That's enough," she shouted, her voice ringing through the clearing. Tobias hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "Out of my way, girl. You don't understand what you're holding." "Oh, I understand perfectly," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "This Bloom isn't a weapon, it's a choice, and I choose to protect Marcus, no matter what it takes." The Bloom pulsed in her hands, its glow intensifying until the clearing was bathed in silvery light. The magic surged through her, filling her with a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Tobias's sneer faltered as the light enveloped her. "What are you doing?" "Ending this," Sophia said, her voice calm and resolute. She stepped forward, the Bloom's power radiating outward in waves. Tobias raised the spear, but before he could strike, the light surged, knocking him back with a force that sent him crashing into a tree. The The spear fell from his hand, and Tobias slumped to the ground, unconscious. Sophia turned to Marcus, who was on his knees, breathing heavily. She rushed to his side, cradling his face in her hands. "Marcus, it's over," she whispered. His golden eyes softened as he looked at her, his lips curving into a faint smile. "You did it?" "No," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We did it." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Sophia and Marcus sat together beneath the ancient tree, the Luna bloom glowing softly between them. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus took her hand, his grip warm and steady despite his injuries. "Now we make sure no one ever uses this bloom again. Its magic belongs to the forest, not to hunters, and not to us." Sophia nodded, her resolve hardening. "We'll protect it. Together." Marcus's gaze lingered on her, his eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, something that made her heart ache in the best way. "Thank you, Sophia, for everything. You don't have to thank me," she said, smiling through her tears. "You're worth it." As they sat in the quiet of the forest, the Luna bloom's magic wrapped around them like a protective cocoon. They had won the battle, but their journey was far from over. The bloom's power was both a gift and a burden, and its secrets were yet to be fully unraveled. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. Chapter 13. The curse's origin. The forest had never felt so alive. The tension that had gripped it during their battle with Tobias seemed to dissipate, replaced by an almost reverent stillness. The Luna bloom, its silvery petals still glowing faintly, rested in Sophia's lap as Marcus leaned against the ancient tree beside her. "You've said the Luna bloom cursed your family," Sophia began, her fingers tracing the flower's delicate edges. "But there's more to this, isn't there?" Marcus nodded, his gaze distant. "The curse wasn't just a punishment, it was a warning. My ancestor, Aldrich, took the bloom for selfish reasons, ignoring the bond between it and the forest. The guardian spirit responsible for the bloom's magic retaliated, tying our bloodline to the moon and the wild. It made us wolves, beasts driven by instincts we couldn't control." Sophia frowned, her heart aching for him. "But why wolves? Why not something else?" Marcus gave a humorless laugh. "Because wolves are creatures of loyalty, of pack and family. The curse was a cruel irony tying us to what we destroyed. My ancestor's greed broke the balance, and we were forced to live as reminders of what we'd taken." "And the guardian?" Sophia asked, glancing around as if the spirit might appear. "Is it still here?" "Yes," Marcus said, his tone cautious. "It's bound to this forest, watching over the Luna bloom. It only reveals itself when it chooses to, and only to those it deems worthy." Sophia looked down at the bloom, its glow dimming slightly. "Do you think it'll show itself to us?" Marcus hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know. But if it does, it won't be out of kindness. The guardian is unforgiving." As the hours passed, the forest seemed to shift around them, the air growing heavier with a sense of anticipation. Sophia tended to Marcus's wounds, using what supplies she had left from her pack. The poison from the silver thorn had subsided, but his injuries were still severe. "You need rest," Sophia said, brushing a hand over his forehead. "I am fine," Marcus insisted, though his voice was strained. "Marcus." Her tone left no room for argument. He sighed, leaning back against the tree. "Only because you said so." Sophia smirked. "You relearning." As night fell, the forest came alive with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. Sophia built a small fire to keep them warm, the flames casting flickering shadows over their faces. She sat beside Marcus, the Luna bloom resting on a cloth between them. Its glow had dimmed further, as though conserving its energy. "Do you think the curse is truly broken?" Sophia asked, her voice quiet. Marcus stared into the fire, his expression thoughtful. "I didn't feel the same pull I used to, not to the moon, not to the wild. But the bloom's magic is unpredictable. It may have freed me, but I wouldn't know for certain until the next full moon." Sophia nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever happens." Marcus turned to her, his silver eyes soft in the firelight. "You're relentless, you know that? Someone has to keep you in line," she teased, her lips curving into a smile. For the first time since their journey began, Marcus laughed a deep, genuine sound that warmed her more than the fire. The laughter faded as a low hum filled the air. Sophia stiffened, her hand instinctively reaching for Marcus's. "What is that?" she whispered. Marcus's expression darkened. "The Guardian." The hum grew louder, resonating through the ground and the air. A soft glow began to emanate from the trees, and a figure stepped into the clearing. It was humanoid but otherworldly, its form shifting like smoke caught in moonlight. Its eyes glowed a brilliant silver, and its voice echoed in their minds rather than their ears. "You have trespassed on sacred ground." Sophia tightened her grip on Marcus's hand, her heart pounding. "We didn't come to harm the bloom," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "We came to protect it." The Guardian's glowing eyes fixed on her. "You claim to protect what you do not understand. The bloom is not yours to wield." "It's not about wielding it," Marcus said, his voice firm. He struggled to his feet, facing the Guardian despite his injuries. "We came to stop a hunter, a man who would have used the bloom's power to destroy. That's why we're here." The Guardian's gaze shifted to him, its voice colder now. "You speak as one who has inherited the sins of your bloodline. Why should I believe you?" Sophia stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held out the bloom. "Because he's not like them," she said. "Marcus has spent his life fighting this curse, not embracing it. He's risked everything to make things right. Isn't that enough?" The Guardian tilted its head, its form rippling with energy. "You speak with conviction, mortal, but words are not enough." The figure extended a hand, and the Luna bloom floated from Sophia's grasp, hovering between them. The Guardian studied it for a long moment before turning back to Marcus. "You claim to have broken the curse. Prove it." Marcus took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "How?" The Guardian extended its hand toward him. "You must face the bloom's power. If your intentions are pure, you will endure. If not, the curse will consume you." Sophia's heart stopped. "No, he's already been through enough." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, silencing her. "It's okay, Sophia." "No, it's not," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." He turned to her, his expression soft. "Yes, I do. For you. For us." Before she could protest further, Marcus stepped forward, his hand reaching for the Luna bloom. The moment his fingers touched the petals, the clearing erupted in light. Marcus was engulfed by the bloom's magic, his form glowing with the same silvery hue. Sophia shielded her eyes, her heart pounding as the light grew brighter. "Marcus," she cried, her voice drowned out by the magic's roar. The Guardian watched silently, its expression unreadable. Finally, the light began to fade, and Marcus collapsed to his knees. "Marcus!" Sophia rushed to his side, her hands cradling his face. He opened his eyes slowly, their familiar silver replaced by a soft human gray. "It's gone," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "The curse. It's gone." Sophia laughed through her tears, pulling him into a tight embrace. The Guardian stepped forward, its voice softer now. "You have proven yourself, descendant of Aldrich. The bloom's power is no longer yours to bear." The Luna bloom dimmed, its glow fading until it was nothing more than an ordinary flower. As the Guardian vanished into the forest, Sophia and Marcus sat together in the quiet, their hearts light for the first time in what felt like forever. The curse was truly broken, but their journey wasn't over yet. Chapter 14. Under the blood moon, the forest was quiet, the eerie calm of a place holding its breath. Marcus and Sophia lingered in the clearing where the Luna bloom had dimmed, its petals now an ordinary white, stripped of its otherworldly glow. The Guardian's departure left the air heavy with an unspoken promise. Balance had been restored, but the cost lingered in their hearts. Sophia turned to Marcus, her hand brushing against his arm. "How do you feel?" He flexed his fingers, glancing at the sky where dawn's light barely touched the horizon. "Free," he said, his voice tinged with wonder. "For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the moon pulling at me. It's quiet." Sophia smiled, relief flooding her chest. Then it's really over. Marcus's expression softened as he looked at her. Because of you. Before she could respond, the faint sound of footsteps reached their ears. Marcus stiffened, his instincts still sharp despite the absence of the curse. Tobias, he growled. Sophia's stomach twisted. He asked back. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. He wouldn't give up that easily. They moved quickly, retracing their steps through the forest as the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees. The path back to Sophia's shop felt longer now, the weight of what they endured pressing down on them. But as they neared the edge of the woods, the sight that greeted them stopped them in their tracks. Tobias stood in the middle of the dirt path, his coat bloodied and torn but his stance unwavering. In his hand he clutched the silver-tipped spear, its runes glowing faintly in the dim light. I knew you'd come back this way, Tobias said, his voice rough but confident. Tobias, Marcus said, his voice low and threatening. This doesn't have to end badly for you. Walk away. Walk away. Tobias laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. You think I've come this far to walk away? You've taken everything from me. Sophia stepped forward, her heart pounding. This isn't about you, Tobias. The Luna Bloom's power is gone. There's nothing left to take. Tobias's eyes burned with rage. Liar. That flower still has power, I know it. And if it doesn't, then I'll make you pay for what you've taken from me. Marcus moved in front of Sophia, his body tense. If you want to fight, you'll have to go through me. Tobias sneered. With pleasure. The fight was brutal. Tobias lunged with the spear, his strikes quick and precise, forcing Marcus to dodge and parry with movements that were still sharp despite his exhaustion. The two clashed in a whirlwind of fury and desperation, their battle tearing through the forest with each blow. Sophia watched helplessly, her heart in her throat. Every time Tobias swung the spear, she feared it would be the strike that ended Marcus's life. Marcus! She cried as Tobias landed a blow that sent him sprawling to the ground. Tobias advanced, his spear raised for the final strike. No, Sophia screamed, running toward them. Marcus growled, his body coiled as he prepared to intercept Tobias, but the hunter was faster. He thrust the spear downward only for Sophia to throw herself in front of Marcus, the blade grazing her arm as she knocked Tobias off balance. Tobias stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. You, he snarled, his focus shifting to Sophia. She held her ground, ignoring the burning pain in her arm. You can win, Tobias. Let it go. Never, Tobias spat, raising the spear again. Before he could strike, Marcus surged forward, tackling Tobias to the ground. The spear flew from his grasp, landing a few feet away. Sophia rushed to grab it, her hands trembling as she turned it over in her grip. The runes pulsed with a faint, malevolent energy that made her stomach churn. Destroy it, Marcus shouted, holding Tobias down. Sophia hesitated, the weight of the spear heavy in her hands. How? Break the runes? Sophia raised the spear high and brought it down against a jagged rock. The runes flared, their light flickering violently before fading altogether. The spear's blade shattered, leaving only a useless shard of metal. Tobias let out a roar of rage, throwing Marcus off and scrambling toward Sophia. But Marcus intercepted him again, his fist connecting with Tobias's jaw with a sickening crack. Tobias crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The forest fell silent once more, the tension ebbing like the tide. Sophia dropped the broken spear, her hands shaking as Marcus approached her. Are you okay? He asked, his gaze scanning her for injuries. She nodded, though her arm throbbed where the spear had grazed her. It's over. Marcus exhaled, his shoulders relaxing as he pulled her into a fierce embrace. You're unbelievable, you know that? She laughed softly, her head resting against his chest. I could say the same about you. They left Tobias in the woods, bound and unconscious. Marcus assured her the forest's guardians would deal with him now that the Bloom's power had been restored to balance. By the time they reached Sophia's shop, the sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the sleepy town. Inside, Marcus sank onto the couch in the break room, his exhaustion catching up with him. Sophia grabbed the first aid kit, tending to his wounds in silence. "You should rest," she said, brushing a hand through his hair. "So should you," Marcus murmured, his eyes half closed. Sophia smiled, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "We'll rest, together." As Marcus drifted off, Sophia sat beside him, her heart heavy but full. The curse was gone, the Bloom-S magic was safe, and Tobias was defeated. For the first time in weeks, peace felt like more than just a fleeting hope. It felt real, and with Marcus by her side, she knew it would last. Chapter 15, Thorns and Sacrifice. The days following Tobias' defeat passed quietly, though the undercurrent of change lingered like a half-forgotten melody. Sophia and Marcus settled into a tentative rhythm, both too exhausted to think beyond the moment but too aware of the unspoken questions between them. Marcus spent most of his time at the flower shop, helping Sophia with small tasks as he recovered from his injuries. The scars left by Tobias' attacks were healing, but the emotional toll was harder to shake. Sophia noticed the way Marcus' gaze would drift toward the woods whenever the shop fell silent. She knew he was wrestling with the weight of everything they'd been through: the curse, the bloom, Tobias. She wanted to help, but she wasn't sure how. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Marcus stood at the edge of the woods behind the shop. Sophia found him there, his silhouette stark against the fading light. "You rethinking about the bloom?" she said softly, stepping up beside him. Marcus nodded, his expression distant. "It feels strange, not being tied to it anymore. Like a part of me is. Missing. You're not missing anything," Sophia said, her voice firm. "You whole, Marcus. For the first time in your life, you free." He turned to her, his silver eyes searching hers. "But at what cost? The Bloom-S power is still out there. The Guardian may have taken it back, but what if someone else tries to find it?" Sophia frowned, her stomach tightening. "Then we'll stop them, together." Marcus hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I am not sure it's that simple." "What do you mean?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The Bloom-S magic was tied to my bloodline, Sophia. Even if the curse is gone, there's still a connection. I can feel it, faint but constant. If someone finds the bloom and uses its power, it'll affect me and anyone close to me." Sophia's chest tightened, fear prickling at the edges of her thoughts. "So what do we do? Just keep watching the woods forever?" "No," Marcus said, his voice resolute. "I think it's time to put an end to this permanently." Sophia's heart sank. "You're talking about destroying the bloom?" He nodded. "It's the only way to make sure no one can use its power again." "But the Guardian isn't infallible," Marcus interrupted. "It let Aldrich take the bloom centuries ago. It could happen again. The only way to protect it and everyone else is to destroy it." Sophia stared at him, her mind racing. The Bloom-S power had caused so much pain, but it had also saved Marcus. It had healed him, broken the curse that had defined his life. Could they really destroy something so powerful? "How?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. "There's a ritual," Marcus said. "A way to sever the Bloom-S connection to the forest and to me, but it's dangerous." "Of course it is," Sophia muttered, a bitter laugh escaping her. "Nothing about this has been easy." Marcus reached for her hand, his touch warm and grounding. "I want to ask you to come with me." Her head snapped up, anger flashing in her eyes. "You don't get to decide that. We've been through everything together, Marcus. I am not letting you do this alone." He opened his mouth to argue, but the determination in her gaze silenced him. "Fine," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But don't say I didn't warn you." They spent the next day preparing for the ritual. Marcus explained that the Bloom-S destruction required a balance of forces: fire and water, light and shadow, creation and destruction. The elements had to work in harmony, or the ritual could backfire, unleashing the Bloom-S power instead of ending it. Sophia gathered supplies while Marcus mapped out their path. The ritual had to be performed in the heart of the forest, where the bloom had originally taken root. As they worked, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of the end, not just for the bloom, but for the fragile peace they found together. That night, under the light of a crescent moon, they set out for the forest. The air was cool and heavy, the scent of moss and earth thick around them. They reached the clearing where the Luna bloom had been discovered, its glow long since faded. Marcus knelt before the tree that had cradled the bloom, his hands brushing the twisted roots. "This is where it ends," he said softly. Sophia stood beside him, the pouch of supplies clutched tightly in her hands. "What do we do?" Marcus took a deep breath, his voice steady. "We channel the bloom's magic into the elements, forcing it to disperse. Once the balance tips, the bloom will burn away and its power will be gone forever." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding. "Let us do it." The ritual began with fire. Marcus lit a small flame at the base of the tree, its light flickering against the dark bark. Sophia poured water around the flame, creating a circle that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Next came the bloom itself. Marcus placed the flower in the center of the circle, its petals dull but still strangely vibrant. Sophia held her breath as Marcus began to chant, his voice low and resonant. The air around them seemed to hum, the magic of the bloom awakening in response. The glow of the flower intensified, its light pulsating in time with Marcus's words. Sophia watched in awe as the flame grew brighter, the water shimmering with reflected light. But then the balance shifted. The glow of the bloom turned dark, its once silvery light deepening to crimson. The air grew thick and a low, ominous hum filled the clearing. "Marcus!" Sophia's voice wavered. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice strained. The bloom's magic lashed out, tendrils of energy surging toward Marcus. He gritted his teeth, his body trembling as he fought to contain it. "Marcus, stop!" Sophia cried, rushing forward. "No," he roared. "It has to end now." The bloom's light exploded outward, blinding them both. When the light faded, Sophia found herself on the ground, her ears ringing. She scrambled to her feet, her heart racing. "Marcus," she called, panic clawing at her chest. A figure emerged from the shadows, stumbling but upright. "Sophia," Marcus said, his voice weak but steady. She ran to him, her hands gripping his arms as she searched his face. "Are you okay? What happened?" "It's gone," he said, his gaze distant. "The bloom. It's gone." Sophia glanced at the clearing. The flower had disintegrated, its ashes scattered across the ground. The oppressive energy that had filled the air was gone, replaced by a strange, peaceful stillness. Marcus looked at her, his silver eyes soft. "It's over." Sophia pulled him into a fierce embrace, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." As they stood together in the quiet of the forest, the weight of their journey lifted. The bloom was gone, its magic extinguished. But their story was far from over. Chapter 16, the hunter's final strike. The destruction of the Luna bloom should have brought relief. But as Marcus and Sophia returned to her shop, a gnawing sense of unease settled over them. The forest, though calm, seemed to hold its breath, as though waiting for the final ripple of the bloom's magic to fade. Marcus, though free from the curse, was quieter than usual. His steps were heavier, his eyes clouded with thoughts he didn't voice. Sophia knew better than to press him, but the silence between them felt heavier than any words could have been. As they reached the edge of town, the lights of the flower shop came into view, a beacon of normalcy amidst the chaos they had endured. But as they approached, a cold realization struck Sophia like a slap. The door to the shop was ajar. "Stay behind me," Marcus said immediately, his voice low and sharp. Sophia nodded, her stomach twisting. Marcus pushed the door open cautiously, stepping inside. The shop was in disarray, flowers and vases lay shattered across the floor, the sweet scent of blooms mingling with the acrid smell of something burnt. "Tobias," Marcus muttered, his fists clenching. Sophia followed him inside, her eyes scanning the wreckage. "Do you think he knows the bloom is gone?" "He knows," Marcus said grimly. "This is his way of sending a message." A faint sound caught Sophia's attention, a soft rustling from the back of the shop. Marcus heard it too, his body tensing as he moved toward the source. "Marcus, wait," Sophia whispered, but he was already moving, his steps silent and deliberate. As they rounded the corner, they found Tobias standing in the greenhouse, a cruel smile spreading across his battered face. "I figured you'd come back here," Tobias said, his voice dripping with malice. "You've got a habit of underestimating me." "Tobias," Marcus growled, his voice low and dangerous. "It's over. The bloom is gone." Tobias's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Gone?" He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "You mean destroyed?" "Yes," Sophia said, stepping beside Marcus. "You can use it. You've lost." Tobias let out a harsh laugh. "Lost? You think this is about winning or losing?" His eyes flicked to Marcus. "This was always about making you suffer. The bloom was just a bonus." Before either of them could react, Tobias pulled a vial from his coat, a dark liquid that glinted ominously in the greenhouse's dim light. "What is that?" Sophia asked, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Tobias smirked. "A little insurance policy. You see, even without the bloom, its power lingers in the forest, in you, and in your precious wolf." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Tobias uncorked the vial, the liquid inside hissing as it met the air. "This," he said, holding it up, "is concentrated magic distilled from the remnants of every creature tied to the bloom, including your cursed bloodline." Sophia's breath caught. "You're insane." Tobias shrugged. "Maybe, but I am also thorough." He threw the vial to the ground. It shattered, releasing a plume of dark smoke that filled the greenhouse. Marcus shoved Sophia behind him as the air thickened, the smoke swirling around them like a living thing. The room seemed to warp, the plants wilting and twisting under the magic's influence. The smoke coalesced into a shape, a shadowy beast with glowing red eyes, its form shifting and unstable. Marcus snarled, his body instinctively shifting partway into his wolf form. "Marcus!" Sophia began, but he charged at the beast before she could stop him. The battle that followed was unlike anything Sophia had seen. The beast moved like liquid shadow, its strikes fluid and unpredictable. Marcus met it head-on, his claws tearing through the smoke only for it to reform moments later. Tobias watched from the edge of the greenhouse, his expression triumphant. "You see, you'll never be free, Marcus. The bloom may be gone, but its curse will haunt you forever." Sophia's mind raced. The beast wasn't invincible, its form flickered and faltered each time Marcus struck it. But it wasn't enough. "Tobias!" she shouted, turning to him. "Call it off," he laughed. "Why would I? This is justice." Sophia's gaze darted to the shattered vial on the ground. The dark liquid had seeped into the soil, fueling the beast's magic. "The soil," she murmured, her eyes narrowing. Grabbing a nearby watering can, Sophia filled it with the remaining water she'd infused with herbs earlier for Marcus's wounds. She ran to the soil, pouring the water over the contaminated ground. The effect was immediate. The beast let out a deafening roar, its form flickering violently as the purified water seeped into the earth. Marcus seized the opportunity, launching himself at the creature with a feral snarl. His claws raked through its center, and this time the beast didn't reform. It collapsed in on itself, the smoke dissipating into the air. "No." Tobias screamed, his triumphant expression twisting into one of rage. Marcus turned to him, his eyes blazing. "It's over, Tobias." Tobias reached for another weapon, but Sophia stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Dante," she said, her tone ice cold. "You've lost. Dante make it worse." For a moment Tobias hesitated. Then, with a snarl, he turned and fled into the night. The greenhouse was silent, the lingering magic fading with the last traces of the beast. Marcus sank to his knees, his human form returning as exhaustion overtook him. Sophia rushed to his side, her hands cradling his face. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded, his breaths ragged. "It's done." Sophia looked around the greenhouse, the plants slowly recovering from the magic's assault. For good this time. Marcus met her gaze, his silver eyes softening. For good. She smiled, her tears falling freely now. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "For what?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "For letting me fight with you," she said, her voice breaking, "for trusting me." Marcus's hand covered hers, his touch warm and steady. "I couldn't have done it without you, Sophia." They sat together in the quiet of the greenhouse, the world finally at peace around them. For the first time, they allowed themselves to hope for a future free of curses, hunters, and shadows. And for a love strong enough to weather anything. Chapter 17, Petals in the Wind. The days following Tobias's final defeat brought an unfamiliar calm to both Sophia and Marcus's lives. The once constant threat of the Luna bloom and the looming shadow of hunters no longer hung over them. The forest, vibrant and alive, seemed to reflect the peace they felt in their hearts. But peace didn't mean life stopped moving. For Sophia, her flower shop became a place of comfort and renewal, a safe haven after weeks of chaos. She spent her mornings arranging bouquets, her afternoons tending the greenhouse, and her evenings finding new ways to weave Marcus into her life. For Marcus, the adjustment was more profound. With the curse gone, he no longer felt the pull of the moon or the feral instincts that had defined him for so long. At first, the quiet inside him was unsettling, a silence that felt unnatural after years of inner turmoil. But with Sophia by his side, he began to embrace the possibilities that freedom offered. One crisp morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows of magnolia blooms, Marcus leaned against the counter, watching Sophia carefully tie ribbons around a bouquet of wildflowers. "You're staring again," Sophia said without looking up, a smile tugging at her lips. "Can you blame me?" Marcus replied, his tone teasing. She glanced up at him, her cheeks warming under his gaze. "If you're not going to help, you can complain when I put you to work later." Marcus chuckled. "Fine. What do you need?" "Finish trimming those roses," she said, nodding toward the basket on the counter. He picked up the shears, his hands moving with surprising precision for someone who claimed to know nothing about flowers. "You've gotten better at this," Sophia noted, watching him out of the corner of her eye. Marcus shrugged. "Good teacher." Sophia smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. Moments like this, quiet and shared, were becoming her favorite part of the day. As the afternoon faded into evening, Marcus suggested a walk through the woods. Sophia hesitated at first, memories of their recent battles still fresh in her mind, but his reassuring smile put her at ease. The forest was different now. The oppressive energy that had once lingered there was gone, replaced by a serene beauty. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling like whispers, and the faint scent of pine and earth filled the air. They walked in comfortable silence, their hands brushing occasionally until Marcus took her hand in his. "I wanted to bring you here," Marcus said as they reached a small clearing. Sophia looked around, her breath catching. The clearing was bathed in golden light, the last rays of the sun illuminating a field of wildflowers that stretched as far as she could see. "Marcus," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. "I found this place when I was a kid," he said, his voice soft. "Whenever the curse felt like too much, I'd come here to remind myself that there was still beauty in the world." Sophia turned to him, her eyes glistening. "You've always had hope, even when you thought it was impossible." He shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I guess I had to. If I didn't, I might not have made it this far." She squeezed his hand. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Marcus looked down at her, his silver eyes warm. "That strength is yours too, you know. You kept me going when I wanted to give up." Sophia blushed, her heart swelling at his words. "We've both been through a lot," she said, her voice steady. "But I think we're finally where we're supposed to be." Marcus pulled her into his arms, his touch gentle yet firm. "I think so too." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they stood together in the clearing, their pasts behind them and their future unwritten. A shift in the winds that night as they returned to the shop, a breeze swept through the town, carrying with it the faintest scent of something unfamiliar. Marcus stiffened, his hand tightening around Sophia's. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I don't know," he said, his gaze scanning the darkened streets. "But something's coming." Sophia frowned, her heart sinking. After everything they had faced, the thought of another threat felt unbearable. "We'll deal with it," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. Marcus looked at her, his expression softening. "We will," he agreed. Together. Though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew the fight wasn't over. The destruction of the bloom had brought them peace, but it had also left a void, a power vacuum that someone, somewhere, might seek to exploit. But as they stepped inside the shop, the warmth of their shared space wrapped around them, and the weight of the unknown lifted just enough to let them breathe. For now, they had each other, and that was enough. Chapter 18, A Love Eternal. The following weeks brought a sense of normalcy that felt almost surreal to Sophia and Marcus. The shop thrived with a renewed energy, customers drawn to the vibrant arrangements that seemed to reflect the joy Sophia felt inside. Marcus found himself more involved than ever, his hands steady as he trimmed stems, arranged bouquets, and even charmed the occasional customer with his dry humor. But amid the bustling days and quiet evenings, a question lingered between them, unspoken but ever present. What came next? Sophia felt it in the way Marcus would glance toward the woods, his silver eyes clouded with thoughts he didn't share. She felt it in her own heart, a yearning for something more, though she couldn't yet name it. One crisp autumn evening, as the shop closed for the day, Marcus appeared with a small bundle of wildflowers in his hands. He picked them himself, an untamed collection of daisies, asters, and goldenrod tied with a simple string. "For you," he said, holding them out. Sophia took the bouquet, her smile widening. "You're getting good at this," Marcus chuckled. "Don't tell anyone, it'll ruin my reputation." She laughed, the sound warm and bright, but the moment was tinged with something deeper. Marcus's expression softened and he reached for her hand. "Sophia," he began, his voice steady but low, "there's something I need to say." Her heart fluttered. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around hers. "For most of my life, I didn't believe in hope. I didn't believe in love or a future or anything beyond surviving the next full moon. And then you came along. Marcus, you gave me more than just hope," he continued, his silver eyes locking onto hers. "You gave me a reason to fight, a reason to believe that I could have a life, one that's more than just surviving. You saved me, Sophia." Tears blurred her vision as his words sank in. "I didn't save you, Marcus. You saved yourself. I just reminded you what you were fighting for." His lips curved into a faint smile. "Then remind me every day." Sophia's breath caught as he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, weathered box. He opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, its design reminiscent of a vine twisting around a single, shining gemstone. "Marry me," Marcus said, his voice steady and filled with quiet intensity. "Be my family. Be my future." Sophia's tears spilled over as she threw her arms around him, her answer clear in the way she held him close. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, Marcus. 1,000 times yes." The ceremony, the wedding, took place in the clearing Marcus had shown her, the field of wildflowers blooming in vibrant colors under a cloudless sky. The forest, once a place of fear and danger, now felt like a sanctuary, a testament to the battles they had fought and the love that had carried them through. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended by a few close friends and townsfolk who had supported them through the years. Sophia wore a gown that seemed to flow like water, its fabric shimmering in the sunlight, and Marcus stood tall and proud in a simple suit that highlighted the quiet strength she had always admired. As they exchanged vows, their voices steady despite the tears in their eyes, the breeze carried the faint scent of pine and earth, a reminder of the bond they shared with the land that had shaped their story. When Marcus slipped the ring onto Sophia's finger, his hand trembled slightly, but his eyes never left hers. "You re my home," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And you re mine," she replied, her heart overflowing. Building a new life in the weeks that followed, life seemed to blossom around them. The shop continued to thrive, now with Marcus fully at Sophia's side, their partnership as seamless in business as it was in love. The townsfolk, once wary of Marcus's quiet demeanor and enigmatic past, embraced him as one of their own. They saw in him the man Sophia had always known him to be: loyal, kind, and fiercely protective of the life they had built together. And though the shadows of their past lingered at the edges of their memory, neither Sophia nor Marcus let fear dictate their future. A whisper of the future one evening, as they sat together on the back porch of their home, Sophia leaned against Marcus, her head resting on his shoulder. The air was cool, the stars bright against the Inkai sky. "What do you think comes next?" she asked, her voice soft. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hand brushing over hers. "Whatever it is," he said finally, "we'll face it together." Sophia smiled, closing her eyes as the sound of the forest surrounded them, a symphony of life, growth, and renewal. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future felt wide open, filled with possibility and promise. And as Marcus kissed her temple, his touch warm and steady, Sophia knew one thing for certain: their love, born in the shadow of the Luna bloom, would endure like the wildflowers that grew in the clearing, a testament to resilience, hope, and the beauty of a life shared forever. Chapter 19, The Dawn of a New Moon. The first full moon since the destruction of the Luna bloom came quietly, its silvery light spilling over the town like a soft blanket. For Marcus, the night carried a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The curse was gone, but its memory lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the pain and loss it had brought. Sophia sensed his unease as they closed the flower shop for the evening. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him as they walked home. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. Marcus gave her a faint smile. "I know, but it still feels strange." They reached their house, a cozy, modest home nestled near the edge of the forest. The porch light cast a warm glow over the steps, and the faint scent of lavender from Sophia's garden filled the air. "Do you want to go out there?" Sophia asked, nodding toward the woods. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "I think I need to, just to be sure." "Then I am coming with you," she said without hesitation. Marcus arched a brow. "You don't have to, I want to," she interrupted, her voice firm. He chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I should be known better than to argue." They walked into the forest, the moonlight filtering through the trees and casting ethereal patterns on the ground. The air was cool and still, the familiar sense of pine and earth mingling with the faint hum of distant crickets. Marcus paused in a small clearing, the same one where they had faced so many trials together. He tilted his head back, his silver eyes reflecting the light of the moon. Sophia watched him, her heart swelling with pride and love. This was the man she had fallen for, the man who had endured so much yet remained unbroken. "Anything?" she asked after a moment. Marcus lowered his head, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "Nothing, just peace." Sophia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Good." He turned to her, his expression softening. "I never thought I'd get to feel this way. Like the weight of the world has finally been lifted." "You deserve it," Sophia said, stepping closer. "You've fought harder than anyone I've ever known, Marcus. You've earned this peace." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch warm and steady. "I wouldn't have made it here without you." Sophia smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I think we saved each other." Marcus leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. The forest around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the steady rhythm of their hearts. As the moonlight bathed them in its glow, the shadows of their past felt far away. For the first time, the moon was no longer a reminder of what had been lost, but a symbol of what they had gained: freedom, love, and a future full of promise. Returning to the world the next morning, Sophia woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of birdsong outside the window. She stretched, her body sore but content after their late-night walk. She found Marcus in the kitchen, His hair tousled and his expression relaxed as he poured 2 mugs of coffee. "Morning," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Morning," he replied, handing her a mug. "How do you sleep?" "Like a rock," she said with a laugh. "You?" He shrugged, a teasing smile playing on his lips. "I kept waking up, making sure I wasn't about to turn into a wolf." Sophia rolled her eyes. "And, still human," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "I think you restuck with that now." Marcus smirked. "I could get used to it." As the days turned into weeks, Marcus and Sophia settled into a new rhythm. The shop flourished, its reputation growing as customers returned for Sophia's arrangements and stayed for Marcus's quiet charm. The townsfolk, once hesitant to embrace Marcus, now treated him as one of their own. Stories of his strength and courage spread, though Sophia always ensured the tales were laced with humor and warmth. Their life, though simple, was rich with meaning. A whisper of something new one crisp autumn morning, as Sophia worked in the greenhouse, she noticed Marcus lingering near the rows of lavender. He seemed lost in thought, his gaze distant. "Marcus," she called, setting down her shears. He turned, his expression unreadable. "Sophia, can I ask you something?" Her brow furrowed. "Of course. What is it?" He hesitated, then took her hands in his grip warm and steady. "Have you ever thought about what comes next for us? Beyond the shop, the forest. Everything." Sophia tilted her head, searching his face. "What do you mean?" "I mean a family," Marcus said, his voice quiet but filled with hope. "I never thought it was possible for me, but now. With you." Sophia's breath caught, her heart swelling. "Marcus, I know it's a lot to ask," he said quickly, "and I didn't want to rush you, but I've been thinking about it and I can shake the thought that this us could be something even bigger." Sophia smiled, tears prickling her eyes. "You're not asking too much. I've thought about it too." His expression softened, his silver eyes bright with emotion. "You have." She nodded, her voice steady. "I want that too, Marcus. A family, a future, everything." For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Marcus pulled her into his arms, his embrace warm and unshakable. Their journey had been long and fraught with danger, but standing there in the greenhouse, surrounded by the life they had built together, they knew one thing for certain: the best was yet to come. Chapter 20, Bloom under the pale moon. The seasons turned, painting the town in vibrant colors as life continued to bloom around Marcus and Sophia. Their love grew deeper, their bond stronger, as they began to shape a future neither had dared to dream of before. The flower shop thrived, not just as a business but as a cornerstone of the community. People came for the arrangements but stayed for the warmth that Sophia and Marcus brought to the space. Their story, the florist and the cursed man who found freedom and love together, became something of a legend, whispered about in quiet admiration. Planting new roots one bright spring morning, Marcus led Sophia into the forest, a shovel slung over his shoulder and a small bundle tucked under his arm. "Are you going to tell me what we're redoing out here, or is this another one of your surprises?" Sophia teased, her hand resting lightly in his. "ULLC," Marcus said, his silver eyes sparkling with mischief. They reached the clearing where the Luna bloom had once grown. Though the bloom itself was gone, the space had transformed into a thriving meadow of wildflowers. The air was thick with the scent of earth and blossoms, and the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting everything in a golden glow. Marcus set down the shovel and unwrapped the bundle, revealing a sapling with delicate leaves and a small pouch of seeds. "We're replanting a garden," he said, his voice soft but steady. Sophia's heart swelled. "Here," he nodded. "This place holds too many memories, good and bad. I want to make something new here, something that belongs to us." Sophia smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. "I love it." Together, they worked to plant the sapling in the center of the clearing, its roots sinking into the fertile soil. Around it, they scattered the seeds Marcus had brought, flowers that would bloom in every season, a testament to resilience and growth. As they finished, Marcus stood back, his arm draped around Sophia's shoulders. "It's beautiful," she said, resting her head against his chest. "It's ours," he replied. A new beginning months passed, and the sapling grew strong, its branches reaching for the sky. The flowers they had planted flourished, creating a riot of color that transformed the clearing into a living canvas. Sophia and Marcus visited often, tending to the garden and sharing quiet moments under the tree's shade. It became their refuge, a place where the weight of the world fell away. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the clearing in shades of gold and violet, Marcus knelt beside Sophia, his hand resting on her growing belly. "Do you think they'll love the garden as much as we do?" Sophia asked, her voice soft. Marcus smiled, his silver eyes filled with warmth. "They'll love it because it's theirs too." Sophia reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I still can't believe this is real sometimes." Marcus pressed a kiss to her temple. "Neither can I, but it is, and it's ours." Under the pale moon, the night their child was born, the moon hung low and full in the sky, its glow spilling into the small bedroom of their home. Sophia held the baby close, her heart full as she gazed down at the tiny, perfect face. Marcus sat beside her, his expression one of awe and quiet joy. He reached out, brushing a finger against the baby's cheek. "She's incredible," he murmured. "She takes after you," Sophia said with a teasing smile. Marcus chuckled softly, his eyes never leaving their daughter. "And she's strong already, I can tell." Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, exhaustion mingling with happiness. "What should we name her?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "Luna." Sophia looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Luna," he nodded. "The moon brought us together. It shaped so much of our story. I think it's only fitting." Sophia smiled, her heart swelling. "Luna it is." As the months turned into years, the garden grew, just as their family did. Marcus and Sophia found a joy they had never imagined possible, their love deepened by the life they had built together. Luna grew up playing among the flowers, her laughter echoing through the clearing as she explored the world her parents had created. She inherited Marcus's silver eyes and Sophia's fiery determination, a perfect blend of the two people who loved her more than anything. One night, as Marcus and Sophia sat together under the tree in the clearing, watching Luna chase fireflies, Marcus turned to Sophia. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" he asked, his voice soft. Sophia nodded, her gaze distant but content. "All the time. Sometimes it feels like a dream." "It's real," Marcus said, taking her hand in his. "And it's ours." The moon shone down on them, its light illuminating the flowers and casting the clearing in an ethereal glow. For Marcus and Sophia, the past was a shadow, the future a promise, and the present a moment of perfect peace. As they sat together, the garden blooming around them, they knew one thing for certain: their story, like the flowers under the pale moon, would endure forever. The end.